Section 3.3 is where we're going to apply the law of detachment and the law of syllogism to determine the validity of conclusions. So unlike inductive reasoning, which uses patterns, for examples, to make a conclusion, deductive reasoning is going to use facts, rules, definitions, or properties to come up with valid conclusions. We can use the law of detachment to determine if it's going to be a valid conclusion. A valid conclusion means that it is impossible for all of the premises or supporting statements of the argument to be true or for its conclusion to be false. So in other words, it would be true no matter what. So the law of detachment, so I should pause. Let's go over here and practice inductive versus deductive reasoning. So we have to determine whether each conclusion is based off of inductive or deductive. Inductive, remember, is patterns. Deductive is going to be based off of facts, definitions, etc. So letter A, if a student is returning a library book, then he or she will be charged a $2 late fee. Chang returned a library book late, so he concludes that he will be charged a $2 late fee. This is just a fact. Here is a rule that this will happen if that. So this would be an example of deductive reasoning because it's just using the facts of what it is. Letter B. Every time Tamika has worn her favorite jersey to a football game, her school's team has won the game. Tamika is wearing her favorite jersey to the football game tonight, so she concludes that her school's team will win. This is basing it off of a pattern. If I wear my football jersey, then we will win. So this would be an example of inductive. Go ahead and go over to the next page, and at the top of the next page, you will see the check question for inductive and deductive reasoning. Go ahead and answer those two questions. So on letter A, you should have said that it was deductive reasoning based off of just the rules of what's going to happen with the soccer ball. Letter B is an example of inductive reasoning based off of how many megabytes have been used every month. All right, now we're going to flip back to the other side and talk about law of detachment. Law of detachment is where you are checking when you have an if-then statement that the second sentence they give you has to match the hypothesis. Okay, so if a car is out of gas, then it will not start. Sarah's car is out of gas. So since this sentence matches my hypothesis, this has to be a logical conclusion. So Sarah's car will not start. That's my logical conclusion. We're going to come over here and determine if these conclusions are valid or invalid based off of using that law of detachment. First example. To go on the field trip, a student must turn in a permission slip. Mariana turned in her permission slip. Conclusion, Mariana can go on the field trip. So first, identify your hypothesis and conclusion. The hypothesis is a student must turn in the permission slip. Conclusion from that is that you get to go on the field trip. Mariana turned in her permission slip. This guy matches my hypothesis. Therefore, the conclusion, Mariana can go on the field trip. This would be valid based off of the law of detachment. So for my explanation, all I would have to write is law of detachment. Okay, letter B. If a figure is a square, then it is a polygon. Figure A is a polygon. Conclusion, figure A is a square. So identify my hypothesis and conclusion. Hypothesis, if a figure is a square, the statement does not match my hypothesis. Therefore, I cannot make a conclusion about figure A. So this would be invalid because my statement does not match my hypothesis. And then a counterexample could be that figure A could be a rectangle. So just because it's a polygon would not mean that it would match to be a square. So if you go over to the next page, at the very top there, you will find the next two questions. So determine if they are valid or invalid. So on letter A, you should have found that it was invalid. If 3 points are non-collinear, then they determine a plane. Points A, B, and C lie in a plane G. This does not match my hypothesis, therefore I cannot come up with a conclusion. So this would be invalid because A, B, and C could be in plane G, but also could be collinear. So without knowing that, we would not. So invalid, and then does not match hypothesis. Letter B. If Dakota goes to the video game store, then he will buy a new game. Dakota went to the video game store this afternoon. My statement matches my hypothesis this time, so this would be a valid conclusion that Dakota bought a new video game. My reasoning would be law of detachment. Okay, the other law that we talk about in this section is law of syllogism. So this law allows you to draw conclusions from two conditional statements when the conclusion of one statement is the hypothesis of the other. For example, if you get a job, then you will earn money. If you earn money, then you will buy a car. The conclusion of the first matches the hypothesis of the second. That is what has to happen in order for it to be law of syllogism. So here would be my conclusion. It's kind of like taking out those two pieces and putting in my others together. So if I get a job, then I will buy a car. So you can bypass these two parts about money because I already know that's going to happen. So let's look at letter A. If you are tired, then you will not do well on your test. If you do not get enough sleep, then you will be tired. So first, what I want to do is see, does the hypothesis of the first match the conclusion of the second, or does the conclusion of the first match the hypothesis of the second? So it doesn't always have to be statement one, statement two, that the conclusion of the first has to match the hypothesis of the second. So they might try and trick you like they're doing now. So the conclusion of this one does match my hypothesis of this. So this would be an example where you could use law of syllogism. So I would write, if you do not get enough sleep, then you will not do well on your test. So bypassing these two pieces and putting together my new if-then statement. Letter B. If Ebony takes a vacation, then she will go to the Grand Canyon. If Ebony goes to the Grand Canyon, then she will hike to the Colorado River. So since the conclusion of the first matches the hypothesis of the second, I can make it my own if-then statement. So if Ebony takes a vacation, then she will hike to the Colorado River. So section 3.3 is just determining if you have inductive or deductive reasoning, and then start using the law of detachment and the law of syllogism to come up with valid conclusions.